Hello, welcome back to another episode of Rissa Chats. Before I get started on this week's one, I just wanted to say thank you to my new subscribers. Thank you for everyone that started supporting the channel and doing comments and things. If you like this kind of content where you could just sit and listen, almost like a podcast, just please consider giving me a subscription. It really helps me out and it's free. Anyway, this week's one's I'm so excited about this one. I'm like buzzing, can you tell? So this week we're going to be talking about fake news and the media. I've had a couple of first-hand experiences that are sort of quite low-key, but still it really taught me the way that they work and how they will, shall we say, stretch the truth to sell a newspaper or to sell a story. And I wanted to talk about that today. Now, before I get started, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not talking about like really major events that are going on in the world. That stuff we do need to know about and people do report it in different ways, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still going on. So, there's no sort of, I'm not kind of talking about that side of it. I'm talking more about the celebrity side of it and the way that they do these little stories and change things around to try and sell papers. So yeah, let's get chatting about that. I've already done my foundation, to be honest. I started doing it and then realised I wasn't filming, so I'm having to start again. But it's not too bad today, although it's very hot outside. So let me talk about the fake news in the media and what I've learned over the years. When I was younger, I used to watch a lot, as many people did. In the 90s, they used to have a lot of like poppy shows and things like that, like Top of the Pops and chat shows and things like this. Now you have to remember that we only had 4 channels at the time, and later on we got 5 TV channels. So all of that stuff had to be on those 5 channels. So pretty much I used to watch these things normally on a Saturday, and they would have like the pop stars of the day on there, and each week it would be something different. And I don't think like everybody else. So I figured out really quickly when I was sort of an early teen that if they were on there, it was normally because they were bringing out a new album. I was a huge Madonna fan and I used to love Madonna, but you'd hardly see her on the TV doing any interviews, especially over here. And if we did see her doing an interview, it would normally end with, oh, and you've got this new album out, what date's it coming out, or what's it called, or, that she's going to sing her latest single. And so I figured out that if they're on, because you don't see them all the time, they kind of disappear and then they come back again, and then they disappear and then they come back again. And so I figured that out really early, that was one thing that we always knew, that it was to sell stuff. So in order for us to see our idols, they would have a record out, and then if that record didn't sell, then they would suddenly just disappear out of the limelight. It's quite a common thing, especially in this day and age now that we've got with the Britain's Got Talent, where people can sort of get famous really, really quickly. So they'll kind of bring a record out and all of the managers will like use them to bring this record out, make loads of money out of them, and then they just disappear, because if the next one fails, there's no point in putting any more money into them, which is horrible, but that's just the way that industry works. So I figured that out really early, but then later on I had a couple of personal experiences that I want to share with you that really solidified the way I think of the media and the way that they do things. So when I got a bit older, I think maybe I was 19 or 20 years old, my cousin had got with a journalist. She was a nice journalist. She wasn't working for like the tabloids or anything like that, but she was working for a magazine actually, a teenage magazine, which I won't say the name of, but I'm pretty sure that it is now gone. So she was working for this magazine and she ended up on a segment on a programme called London Tonight. So let me just explain what happened on the segment and then I'll tell you how it all happened from behind the scenes. So London Tonight was like a local news programme, like a magazine kind of programme. It was on around 6 o'clock. And she ended up on there talking about trains and how the trains were running late and there was always problems with trains being late. So the whole segment is basically like, oh, the trains are always late, I'm always late for work because of them, I rely on them to commute to work and all of this stuff. And in that little segment that she done, she said that she's pregnant at the moment and you know, that the train's making her late. It's so inconvenient, especially as she's pregnant. Or it was something along those lines. Anyway, so let me tell you what had actually happened behind the scenes with that, because this absolutely blew me away. What had happened was she was pregnant, but the family had no idea yet. So she's in her office, working on a magazine, a teenager magazine, like she normally would. And London Tonight had basically had no one for this segment, and it was like a little in-filler thing, because that's what they do if they haven't got anything to put in there. There's no like really major stuff. They just pick something out of a hat and go, right, we'll use that today. So what had happened is that somebody had called up that magazine and said, is there anyone that would be able to do this segment for us today? It's going to be about trains and train times. And she said she would do it, but only if she could announce that she was pregnant on the TV so that her family could find out on telly. So she sort of killed two birds with one stone, and it was a unique way to let us all know. Anyway, she actually drove to work. She didn't actually get the train. What had actually happened was the person that was going to do it had pulled out, and she ended up sort of filling in for it. So they had basically called her up and said, listen, we want to run this story about the trains being late. We've got no one to do it. Is there anyone that can do it? And they didn't care whether you got the train or not. They just wanted to get the segment done. So they, in fact, used her to do that. And she used them to announce that she was pregnant. So that's how they work. They kind of go, well, look, you know, we'll tell you this little bit of news, and people will sit there and moan about it. And that's how they have some kind of control over how we work and how we think and what they want us to believe. You'd have that all the way along. If you really look for it, you will see it. And then I had another incident. Years later, I had a stillborn child. It was a long time ago. She would have been 13 this year. So when I had her, I started a charity to raise money for the special care baby unit. Although she didn't go in a special care baby unit, I wanted to sort of use her. I didn't want her death to be in vain in a way. I just kind of wanted I wanted to do something like special, so that it was almost like she was saving other babies, if you like. And it was a really nice thing for me. Well, at the time, I was friends on Facebook with the local newspaper. And they come up as a friend. I don't think there was really pages then. It was just you added them as a friend, or, you know, you followed them as whatever, as a friend. So on my page, eventually, I had got into making reborn dolls. And I would sell my reborn dolls sometimes via Facebook, or I'd use it for advertising. It's free advertising. So I was doing my dolls like I normally was, and they didn't ever contact me about this charity that I'd done, which raised a load of money for the local hospital. And it bought like a couple of breathing machines. Like, they weren't interested in that at all. But they contacted me about the reborn dolls. Anyway, they asked me if I would like to be in a women's magazine, like Women's Own or something. Actually, I do think it was Women's Own, but yeah, they asked me if I wanted to be in this magazine. And initially I thought, well, they were trying to sort of speak to me because I'd done this charity thing. And I was like, oh, how nice of them. You know, they were really talking to me. They gave me an agent, kind of person, like a, you know, manager person that was just dealing with my story. And they started speaking to me about, you know, if they do this one, then they'll be able to put it national, and we'd be able to be in like the nationals and stuff like that. And they'd pay me for it. And they were going to pay me £400 to do this story. So initially I said, yeah, all right then. I hadn't really signed a contract, but I said to them, yeah, all right, I'll consider doing it for sure. You know, it's £400. It was easy, just talking about, you know, the fact that I'd lost a child and I'd done this charity. And now I'm making these reborn dolls. Oh my goodness me. I get this phone call. I had this one guy who said, can you add me on Facebook so I can sort of have a look. Now, I didn't really share a lot on my Facebook, and he said to me, you don't really share much on, you know, by way of photos and stuff like that. I said, no, I don't, because, you know, I'm kind of one of these people that shares funny stuff, and that's that. So there was that at first, and then the red flag happened. He said to me, he started asking me more about reborn dolls. And I said to him, well, I make them. I don't really collect them. I enjoy painting them. I find it a comfort to paint them. It's almost like therapy. And then later on, you know, they say that doing artistic, creative things is more like a meditation, or, you know, so it can put you in a meditative state. So for me, I think that's what it was. It was almost healing in a way, that I was kind of painting these dolls, and I'd really loved doing it, and I'd sell them, and I just enjoyed it, and I loved it, and, you know, that was that. This guy starts asking me these questions, and they are, I mean, they're far-fetched. And now listen, just before I go on, I've got no problem with the reborn community or how you choose to use your dolls. But what he was doing was he was trying to get me to say that I had replaced my child, who I'd lost to stillbirth, with a reborn baby. And he was like, do you cuddle them? Do you take them out with you? Do you, you know, he was asking me questions like this. I've got no problem with people taking their dolls out if that's what they want to do. They're not breaking the law. It's absolutely fine. But for me, this initial story started with them talking about the charity side of it, and how I had, you know, had this child, and instead of, you know, sort of going into a dark, I mean, it was a dark time, but instead of going into a really dark place, I threw myself into this charity work, because I gave myself this goal of buying these respiratory things, because I thought it'd be such a nice thing. It would help a preemie to breathe, which I thought was lovely, because, you know, my daughter hadn't got a chance to take her breath. So for me, it was a big thing that it would be about that, and they twisted it. And because they twisted it, I pulled out of doing that story, and they were shocked, because I was, you know, living on a council estate in a masonette, and, you know, self-employed and trying to make ends meet, and they would have been paying me. It was like, are you sure it's £400? And I was like, it's £400 for me to do a story that's not true. It's not true. That's not what I was there for, you know, my initial thing. But the simple fact was, at the time, reborn dolls were getting quite hot in the press, and they've just recently been on a program called This Morning, so they've come back again, and they were getting quite a lot of press at the time. And I think there'd been a documentary on where, you know, they'd had ladies that had reborn dolls, and they'd had like entire nurseries and things like this. So pretty much the guy was wanting me to sell a story where I was like that, where I was like, I'm relying on this doll, I'm replacing my child with this doll. And I refused to do it, because I would rather be broke than, you know, say something like that. It was just, for me, I wasn't being truthful I wouldn't have been being truthful to myself. I wouldn't have been being truthful to the world. I would have been putting my reputation on the line and things like this. And I just couldn't do it. I was like, I can't say that I'm sort of replacing this child with a doll. It was very disrespectful for my daughter, I felt, as well. So that's how I figured out how the media work. The way they speak as well, when you're trying to do these stories, it's almost, I don't want to say like slimy. It's almost like they try and entice you. It's like, well, do you cuddle your dolls, or, you know, do you take them to bed with you? He was like that. It was almost weirdly perverse in a way for me. And I was like, how have you managed to go from me doing a charity and raising money for charity to my job and me replacing my child with, that's just not how it works. I was in the reborn community for a really long time, and I met other people who'd lost children, and that's how they'd sort of got to know the dolls and the doll world. And people did, there are people that like take them out for various reasons, and spend time with them and stuff like that for various reasons. In actual fact, they've been proven to help people with Alzheimer's. Reborn dolls release the same hormone that's released when you hold a real baby, and so they've been proven to help people with Alzheimer's, because people with Alzheimer's, they get that hormone released and it's good for them. So, the fact that that's, that they can help with things is brilliant. However, it wasn't something that I was willing to accept as, like, oh, I'll take this £400. It almost felt to me like I was using my daughter, if you know what I mean. And you could say that that's through, both sides of it. However, my plan initially was that I was going to half that and put half of it into the charity, because we needed to raise £1,000, which eventually I did do without the story. But that's what I wanted to do, and I was like, oh, I can put half of it in the charity, so that would be brilliant, and we'll sort of raise some extra cash. But yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't willing to sort of come out and change that story for the sake of them selling newspapers and magazines. I just wasn't willing to do it, so I said no. But that's my insight. So now when I read the news and things, I don't know, things seem a bit far-fetched. Recently, it's been happening to Britney Spears. Now, Britney Spears is an amazing woman. She's been through a lot of stuff. And yeah, it's been well documented that she's got mental health issues. A lot of people have. But that doesn't mean to say that every single time she's in the newspaper, she's having another mental breakdown. So the press were reporting, and still are reporting, and I've seen it on YouTube as well, the YouTubers reporting that she's got severe mental health issues, that she'd had a mental health crisis. Britney then later on reopened her Instagram and was like, I, was dancing, I've hurt my foot. She showed a swollen foot, like, a great big swollen foot over the next 2 days, and was like, just because that happened, I was crying in pain and stuff like that. Do you see what I mean? Like, I think, even if there was some aspect of truth to it, shouting at people in the lobby and stuff like that, even if there was an aspect of truth in it, it's still been twisted. It's been twisted and messed about with, so we're never going to get the full story. They will say whatever they can or go on the past or anything like that in order to sell a newspaper. And the same with my cousin's girlfriend, the same thing. It was a case of like, we need to get this story out. It's going on London tonight and we've got no one to do it. And they really didn't care if she got the train or not. Even though that's a bit of a white lie, it's still not the truth. And they still put it out there. So, and I think this happens a lot. There's sometimes, especially with the tabloids, sometimes they put things out there and I think, do you really honestly think that we believe this? So my advice when it comes to the news and the press and what they're reporting on, especially if it's major headlines, is to go do your research. If you need to read it, go do your research. In general, I try not to read that stuff anymore. The other day I was reading Sky News in the middle of the night because it was like a dark background and I was like, oh, I'll just read Sky News. But afterwards I wished I hadn't. Do you see what I mean? Because the news is never a good thing. Although I would trust Sky more than I would say a tabloid. So, do you see what I mean? But you just don't know, do you? We're only getting one side of the story. They will only put out what they want us to hear. And that's what you've got to be really careful with. I sometimes think that the media have more control over things than the governments do. And the reason I think that is because the media, and I've seen it lots of times, can easily whip up a story, whack it in the newspaper, or put it all over the press. It go everywhere. You know, if it gets sold to one, it gets sold to another, because they're all co-owned by each other. You can look into that as well. If you look into the media and who owns which news groups and things like that, they're all co-owned by each other. So if one story comes out somewhere, it will come out everywhere. So I've watched, you know, especially with politics, I think Boris Johnson was one of the most recent ones, and it was a good example that everything that was in the press was pressurising him to resign. And I think the same thing's happening with this Prime Minister. Like, he's really under a lot of pressure, and some of the stuff that comes out, I'm like, what? Like, why do we need to know this stuff? Do you see what I mean? Like, they can easily have someone at the height of where they are in their career, and the media, the press will do a story, and blam, they're on the floor again. They're in the gutter. So I think as soon as they could lift you up, they could pop you back down. And I think that's the scary thing. I almost think they do have more control than the governments do. I sometimes do think that, because they can easily twist things and make us believe certain things, and you know, they will put things out there, and eventually, if they put it out there enough, it's believable. You kind of go, because this is why people argue. The worst thing is pubs. I think people argue about stuff in pubs that are in the news, or they sit there talking about it. Oh, I've heard this, oh, I've heard that. But what they don't realise is that everything's entwined. So if the news groups are all co-owned by each other, and they're all putting out little snippets in different stories, all it means is that you're going to different, bits of, what's the right word for that? They're going to different media outlets and newspapers and things like this, so that you can read different aspects of this story and get different little bits of it, when actually they've arranged to do it like that. So you'll get one paper that will say, right, this happened. You get another one that will say this happened, but so did this. So it all gives you little tidbits of the same thing. And so you're basically, every single time you sort of click on that stuff, they're getting more and more loaded. I mean, that's why you get so many adverts. If you read the news online, that's why you get so many adverts now, because they're all like affiliate links, aren't they? People are paying to advertise on there. So because they're paying to advertise on there, they're getting paid all the time. You know, it is all about money. It's all cash. And it's really, really sad that it's come to that, you know, people, I think as well, you know, I'm not saying that people haven't made a good living from that. You're here as well, you know, some celebrities will actually call the press. They'll call the paps and say, oh yeah, hello, I'm going to be outside of this shop at this time. And then the paps will all turn up, because then they're getting all their pictures. They're selling, you know, they're getting loads of press, which means they're selling papers. They're getting their little 5 minutes of fame, or whatever, or their 15 minutes, or, you know, whatever. And the paps are getting paid as well. So it works both ways. It's a business. The news, everything's a business, actually, I think. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit more on another one. But yeah, I think everything is a business. It's a business, and money makes the world go round. It's as simple as that. You know, you can sort of try and escape that kind of thing as much as you can. But at the end of the day, money is what it all comes down to. And it's almost a scary prospect that, you know, you're born and you're a number and then everything's about money. Scary. So yeah, that was my little experience with the media. Although it is kind of minor, because I was only dealing really with the locals, you know, in a magazine, a ladies' magazine, it's still an experience that for me solidified what I felt in the first place, what I kind of had figured out years ago, that, you know, you can be in it for that. You'll be selling papers, and for them, they don't really care what it's going to do for you, what the repercussions would be for you. They don't care. And I could have seen a lot of backlash from doing a story like that. So I'm glad I am who I am. I'm glad that I had the balls and you know, to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do a story like that, because, you know, if I did do a story like that, I just would have felt like I would have felt that it was wholly untrue, and also that I was almost using somebody's death to make money. Do you see what I mean? And also sort of, you know, people would have constantly probably thought, well, there's that, you go walking. Can you imagine? I live in like a big town, but it's a town where a lot of people know each other, and I could just imagine just walking through town and people go, oh, look, there's that girl that basically sold a kid's soul and pushes dollies about, you know what I mean? Not that that's a bad thing. I know that there are people that push dollies about, and for them it's a comfort. But for me, the story had got so twisted that it just wasn't worth my time or energy or reputation to do it. But unfortunately, that's the way the media works, and it's all very sad that they do that. It really is. I hope that you got something out of this one, and, you know, I hope that sort of people will be able to sort of give me a bit of comments and a bit of feedback with it, or tell me what you think of the media and how it works. You know, I think that it's not going to stop, but just don't believe everything you read, I guess, is the old cliche. Don't believe everything you read. It's not, unfortunately, a lot of it does get twisted, and yeah, don't believe everything you read, folks. Don't take everything to heart, because a lot of it is a right load of rubbish. Anyway, that was that one. I'm really pleased that I done this one, because I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking, you know, I would love for people to hear that side of things and that side of the stories, and the experience that I've had with that as well, like firsthand. Yeah, tell me what you think, and also thank you for joining me again. I'll be doing a new one on Saturday. Yeah, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.